tuning in. It's wonderful to be here. And Lee, it's so good to see you.
It's great to see you. I'm actually in Maine. Jill is actually in North Carolina. So this is a treat. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, it is. You're
So
missed
we are
around
here.
here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. But we are here today, all of us, to celebrate this wonderful new novel. And so let me just start things off by asking Jill, and you will come to understand as we talk about this, that this book is something very, very different from all of her previous work and really from anybody's previous work. It's quite a work of the imagination. It's a remarkable novel. And so let me just start by asking Jill herself to tell me and to tell all of you about it, what she was thinking, how she wrote it, what, etc., where she got the idea, and then to read a little bit. It's told with multiple voices, several characters in particular. And so, Jill, if you could just introduce us to your novel, what have you got to say about it, and then read from it.
Okay, thank you. I really think it's a novel about memory and what composes our lives when all is said and done. It's about what we leave behind for others to remember or decipher. It's what gets lost along the way. So I have four main point of view characters: Lil and Frank, an elderly couple who have just retired from the Boston area to North Carolina to be near their daughter. And Frank spent a period of his boyhood in North Carolina in the aftermath of a real train wreck that happened in my native county in 1943. His father was on his way home from World War II. His mother had gone to meet him, so they were both on the train. The mother's life was saved because she got up to go to the bathroom, and his father died. And so there's that sort of tragic freak circumstance in his life where he lost a parent. Life as he knew it suddenly stopped, and it marked the before and the after. And his wife Lil had a parallel experience in that her mother went out one night basically saying, "I'll be back." And little did they know she was at the Coconut Grove nightclub in 1942, about a year before this train wreck. And of course did not come home. She died in the fire. And so Lil and Frank's children have joked that it's a marriage founded on tragedy because when they met and connected, that they both had this kind of horrific moment in childhood that changed everything as they thought life would be. They just connected, and so 50 odd years later, here they are. So in many ways it's both the story of their marriage and it's the story of their memories of these lost parents and all that they could not know about those last moments that their parents experienced. And then I have another family, a young single mother, Shelley, who's kind of at the end of her ropes and not in a great place, clearly running from a very difficult past that she's completely avoiding. And she's got a 6-year-old son, Harvey, who is well versed in dirty jokes and ghost stories and all kinds of interesting tidbits and facts. And he's fine in the daytime but terrified at night. So what connects these two families is that Shelley and Harvey live in the house where Frank once lived as a boy. So basically Frank taught archaeology for years, and so I sort of think of Shelley and Harvey as living on top of where Frank once lived. So they're occupying this same geographical space at different times, but really acting out in similar ways. So that was the original idea, which, I mean, there's not much plot in that. So I think, you know, the plot in many ways came later, because I think the first idea was more about what we leave and the language we use throughout our lives, the kind of shorthand we develop with close friends and loved ones. At one point, Lil and her dad leave notes for one another in the aftermath of her mother's death, always saying, "Be right back," which then gets abbreviated to BRB. And at one point, she writes to her children, I have all these notes from my dad. You would spend the rest of your lives wondering who is BRB. And it simply means be right back. And I think we all have those little codes in our lives, or you can say 2 words. And I mean, I could do it to you right now. I won't, but you know, stories. We can all conjure stories. You know, you can say,
Yeah.
remember, and name one object, and everybody in the room laughs who knows the story. And so those objects too in our lives take on meaning, but without someone there to decipher it, it is like a lost language. So that was the idea. And I'll just read a little bit of Lil.
Okay.
We all are haunted by something we did or didn't do, and the passing years either add to the weight or diminish it. Mine have diminished, perhaps because I've spent time thinking about it all. It might sound silly, but I see these bits and pieces as my contribution to evolution, the unearthing and dusting of the prints and markers that led me here. Some seem to bulldoze right through life and up to their headstones, but I want to take my time. I want to find the right words. I imagine my recipient to be you two, or perhaps your children, and I hope this is so, rather than some stranger who comes in and hoists old boxes into a dumpster or rakes away the remainders of my life like the sad debris in the aftermath of a flood or fire. I'll never get over the sight of what we left behind at our home of over 50 years to move down here. A mountain of cast-off things, old towels and linens, papers and books and shoes and pots, side tables and lamps, hoses and hose, packets of seeds I meant to plant, and a rubber squeak toy that had been safely hidden away in the back of my closet by one of the dogs long dead, and so much more. Things not needed, things long forgotten, cans of cream of whatever soup and V8 juice, why? And peas that had sat there forgotten for years, and things that never should have been there in the first place, like tuna helper, or those things in my closet, like that geometric print mini dress I bought in the 60s, hoping to look like Petula Clark or Judy Carn, a perky pixie kind of dress that I never had the nerve to wear, and instead looked at it there at the back of the closet for years, along with a wiglet and a long frosted fall, and some jackets with shoulders resembling a football player or Victorian monarch. We divided it all into Goodwill, consignment, recycle, or landfill. But there were also the things I couldn't let go of, letters, reminders, souvenirs, and I'm taking my time, relieved when I find something that might have gotten lost in that mountain of debris, like one of your drawings from first grade, or the stub from a movie I'd forgotten I even saw, or a note from my father. When the moving van pulled away that afternoon and we got in the car and turned southward, the space within seemed so empty, vacant, our suitcases and silver chest in the trunk, an overnight bag and thermos of coffee on the back seat. And I had that terrible feeling that I had forgotten something, because I was thinking of all the times the car was filled with you two, your belongings, your music and voices, the dogs, while going to school or on vacation or just to the grocery store, where I bought all of those things that I then put on the shelf there in our dimly lit pantry on the red gingham contact paper I spent one snowy afternoon 40 years ago cutting and sticking in place. All those things I put there and then forgot about. It's mysterious how fluid time has become for me. I wake and pour a glass and have no idea what I'll find. In short, I'm homesick and I'm time sick. I would be lying not to say that. It's possible to feel content and resolved and still be homesick. I miss all that no longer is, which is why I paste and piece all these scraps together. Sometimes I hold a ticket or a photo, a piece of paper, while willing myself back to where I first held it. I know that might sound silly, but it's what I do. I want to hear your young voices, the dog scratching to come in. I want to call my father on the telephone, finger in that rotary dial, one number at a time, TW33642. Let me take this playbill and arrive at the theater, or this receipt and find myself there in the produce aisle of Star Market. Then after the show, after I check out, after I sit and let the car warm up, I drive those familiar streets home and find everything just as I left it, the kitchen door creaking behind me. So that's a little Lil. Should I do a little Harvey or what?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes. Do a little Harvey.
A tiny bit of Harvey.
Please, please, yes.
Harvey would be scared at night if he didn't have Peggy. She's fat and warm and she snores, and sometimes her paws move like she's chasing something, like she will chase something if she needs to, and Harvey wakes her up to tell her to do it. But sometimes Harvey is the only one awake, and so he whispers in Peggy's ear to wake up, just to make sure she will do it when he needs her to. Her ear stinks a little in a good way, like how her neck smells under her collar, kind of like the school cafeteria and those big rolls on spaghetti day. His teacher held one up to the principal and said, "Do you think we feed these children enough starch? And does this sauce really count as a vegetable? Really?" Harvey's teacher said, "Really, really," when she thought you were lying. "So you already did your homework," she would say. "Really? You really want me to believe that?" And they did want her to believe that, because she's the youngest teacher at the school and has a convertible and a boyfriend who makes beer. Somebody asked, did her boyfriend know she always eats lunch with Mr. Stone, the man who teaches second grade and runs the summer camp Harvey's mom is making him go to. The same kid asked, why didn't she dump her boyfriend and go with Mr. Stone? She already has everything anybody wants, a car and a dog, a pit bull mix named Susie, but Mr. Stone can dance and he wears cool shoes. Harvey kisses Peggy and smells inside her big soft ear. He keeps his eyes closed and pulls Peggy tight when he hears the back door open and close. He knew it would. Peggy doesn't wake up, and Harvey's mom doesn't wake up. Just Harvey knows someone's in the house and in the hall, and whoever it is stops and stands in the door, just like last time. He wants to look, but is scared to, because there's some ghost that'll blind you for looking and cut out your tongue too. So he just breathes real quiet into Peggy's soft ear and waits.
Thank you. That is great. And Harvey is an unbelievably moving, funny, and terrifying little character. As you can tell from these readings, these people literally leap off the page, Lil with every detail, every bit of the past of her life. This is about the stuff of our lives, the things of our lives. And Harvey with what's going on now. But I want to read a quote that Jill has kept over her desk for at least 20 years that I think we might well keep in mind when we're considering this book. Here's the quote. It's from Kierkegaard. Life must be lived forward, but it can only be understood backward. And then she said about this book, as a writer, I am endlessly fascinated by characters seeking that understanding while also muddling through the unknown. So that's what this is. It is a kind of archaeology. And you, as the reader, I, as the reader, become the archaeologist as we go through the endless clues in the sifting of the time. And time is used very differently here. This book has no linear time. It's really, really interesting what's going on. Of course, we have two kinds of time, forward, the present time, and backward. And it goes backward. It starts, it starts in the present time, and then it goes back. And it is completely different. It also isn't really written in scenes so much as we understand it as in voices that come one after the other and tell us the whole working of their minds and of their memories, while doing that with such incredibly specific detail. So, I mean, this is something very different going on. We don't have scenes as we expect them in fiction. We don't have beginning, middle, and end. We have end, and then we're going back. We're like delving down. I mean, we become the archaeologists. So our whole notion of structure and time has got to be different here, all right? And then furthermore, I think you have to just give yourself over to the language, which, as the New York Times said about Jill's last book, Life After Life, the language sings, and the language itself, will take you through. But do not expect a linear plot. Okay, you are reading Virginia Woolf, you are reading Faulkner. Just get rid of, your expectations and go with what's happening here, which is actually the experience of catastrophe, the experience of time past, the recovery, if you will. And so in a strange way, I think this book is incredibly timely because of the pandemic. It's about catastrophe, and it's about recovery, and it's about memory and how memories are made, and then how they are found again, and how they are worked through. But it's a very new way of writing, and I think you just have to kind of go with the flow. And I'm curious, Jill, how long did it take you to write this book? When did you first get interested in these ideas? When you first heard your daddy talking about that train wreck?
Yeah,
Maybe?
I think I was always taken by the images of that train wreck, and likewise those of the Coconut Grove fire. And in both cases, growing up, hearing my dad talk about the train wreck, and I was curious, and read what could be found. And there's this, this cataloged list of items. And of course, the way that people were identified by, what's in the pocket or the label of a code.
Oh, yeah.
There was a bridal veil up in a tree. It was December, so there were Christmas presents strewn everywhere. And so people's lives suddenly, were connected to these little tiny objects that you might not have even, might not think of in the average day. And yet it's what connected that person to the loved ones. And when I lived in the Boston area for 20 years, I heard people talk about the Coconut Grove fire in a very similar way. It was an event. There was both personal loss with individual families, but then this greater community loss that affected the whole of a community, and it pulled the community together. So there's a lot going on. There's both the private and the public grief, I think, that comes out of an event like that. And so I was thinking of all these objects, because in the aftermath of the Coconut Grove, it was a similar sort of thing. There was a whole building just filled with purses for people to come and stroll the aisles and see if they found the purse that belonged to their loved one. And so some of the writing, early on were just how you write things down that you don't want to forget, and you have no idea if you'll ever use it. It might find its way in an essay or a short story. So I had dabbled, with both of those events in mind. And then I also, a dozen plus years ago, had the good fortune to be asked to teach in Florence. I always say Italy, not South Carolina. And I was so drawn to the Foundling Hospital there. And, you're in this ancient building, and there's a display case of all these beautiful little tokens and lockets and buttons that were sewn into the clothing of the infants left, over the period of hundreds of years. And of course, by way of those tokens being there, we know at least that the one end version of the story, we know that they did not connect, likely did not connect with their person. And yet all of those objects are saying the same thing. They're saying, I'll be back. It's a promise.
Yeah.
Same way that we write on bathroom walls, to say, I was here. I mean, graffiti is a way of saying I was here in this place, or a kid putting his handprint in cement. We're all trying to stop time, hold time. So at one point, Lil, who has taught dance all these years, wonders, well, if every day, if I get up and I extend my leg full height and stand, can I trick time? Or will there be that day when you just aren't able to do it? And I think we all know, anybody who wears reading glasses knows that you actually do just get up one day and you need reading glasses. I mean, there's no rhyme or reason. You don't see it coming. And, we can't trick time, but I think we all try to.
And when you were, so you had these interests, okay, these two catastrophes and so on, and you've had a lot of thoughts about what things can tell us, what artifacts can tell us about time and who we are and so on. And when you began to really actually write this book, though, how did you do it? I mean, with this non-linear structure, I mean, I just sort of start at the beginning and go. Now, you couldn't possibly have done that. What did you do? Did you go character by character, or how did you do this?
I really did it in bits and pieces as they came. And a lot of times working in one character, it was fun to work with Lil's voice, because since she's the one character in first person, a letter, as you know from your wonderful Fair and Tender Ladies, I mean, the beauty of those letters is that you catch the age, you catch the voice, so that it's just permanently present. And so a lot of Lil's, it was fun to sort of come through age with her, while she's also reflecting back, so it's a combination. But I told somebody earlier, I think I'm calling it the Marie Kondo method of novel writing. Not just what sparks joy, but my favorite part of Marie Kondo is how messy you have to be willing to be in the beginning. Take everything you own and throw it on the bed. So for me, this novel was kind of like just clean the head,
I think that's
write all the parts.
I see that. Yeah.
Throw it all together, and then begin sifting and shaking and figuring out. And that's where wonderful Kathy Porries, who you know from working with as well.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
I
The
mean,
great editor. Yeah.
having an editor like Kathy Porries, and I mean, it's exciting to look at all the pieces and
Hmm.
you know, the novel. I think you saw an early draft, and I may have even started with Lil instead of
Hmm.
starting with Shelley. So there were all kinds of changes because that present timeline had to kind of be imposed in many ways.
Hmm.
It's like I had all these clothes and no chest of drawers, you know, so it was like building what's going to hold all the pieces, and
Yeah.
that was that present timeline. And I knew in my mind that it would begin with Frank leaving home to go walk the tracks where the wreck had happened and to hopefully get into his boyhood house and visit it again. But that's basically all I knew of that.
Well, it is the most original construction, I think, of just about any novel, you know, that I have read in years and years and years. And it's a great triumph here. The individual characters are too. Where did you get Harvey? Where did you
Oh
get
my
that little
gosh.
boy?
You know, I love having kids on the page because I just think there's no greater honesty than what a child brings into the world, and it's innocent, you know.
Hmm.
And so Harvey, I did I scarred Harvey as well. His father has left, and he's upset about that and doesn't understand the circumstances. His head is full of all these scary stories. But I think the biggest part of Harvey right now is he was born with a cleft lip that's been repaired, but he has this little scar. And so I imagine that this has been just this joyful kid the first 5 years of his life. And only now, with what comes from other people in society, people noticing his scar, he's become incredibly self-conscious. And so I gave Harvey, you know, fake mustaches. And as soon as I found the fake mustache, you know, and the whole, the image of this little kid, you know, with beach towel and superhero, but he's always in a handlebar mustache, or he likes the Fu Manchu, you know, it just gave his character, it gave his character the details that I really needed.
Yeah.
But I do think children, you know, they don't have a filter, and really their hearts are in the right place. I mean, Shelley at one time, you know, talks about learning when she had babies how the Moro reflex is the only innate fear of humans, you know, this fear of losing the mother. So a baby reaches for its mother, and all of our other fears are learned.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's where Harvey is. He's having to learn.
Well, he is a wonderful, wonderful little character, and I love his mother. I love Shelley, and I have to say I've seen echoes of her in
Yeah.
some of your past work, where you will often have a very appealing young woman who has been thrown on her own. She's just on her own in the world, and often she does have a child, and she's just setting off to try to and she's endangered. I mean, and just to try to, my favorite short story you ever wrote is Little Sparrow, which is set in Boston, I think. And that is the divorced girl with the child, you know, and then a baby is stolen at a little league game, right? A baseball game or something. And it's just, you know, your ultimate fear. But that endangered girl who appears, you know, and has appeared again and again a couple of times, and appeared in your last book, life after life and was killed, as we know. And then it turns out, reading this book, well, we're suddenly at the end, we're at the trial. We're at the trial of the guy that killed her, you know, and I thought, yes, he's going to get it. I was so glad. I was just so glad to have that circle back around. But anyway, you're always writing about women, and you're always writing about women in some way that is just very, very original. Not only the younger one like Shelley, but Lil, who seems to sort of know everything and say everything, you know, and have everything, I guess, really to tell us. One thing I wanted to ask you, in writing, then you wrote draft after draft, I'm taking, and put different things together again and again here.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. That is wonderful. I love the way that it worked. And I wanted to ask you, the novel, the language is so wonderful. I wanted to ask you, do you read poetry? Do you read poetry a lot? I mean, there's a whole lot of poetry that's here. That's really, the language is incredible. And I'm just wondering, were you a poet at any point that I don't know about? A secret poet?
No, you wouldn't know. I mean, I have written some very bad poetry. I mean, I greatly admire poets and poetry, and I do love to read poetry, and especially when I'm working, you know, I love reading short fiction and poetry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I see that. I mean, the language is just extraordinary here. It really is. And I have another question. I think a lot of readers expect humor from you. And, you know, your readers that are, you know, devoted to the belly laugh, you know, and they're going to come to this book and it's going to be like, whoa, you know, not that there aren't wonderfully, you know, funny things, as you can already tell about Harvey and the dog and so on. But I'm just wondering if at this point in your work, if you're, where's the humor? What's going on here? Are you getting a little more serious? What's happening?
You know, that's a great question. I mean, I think, and I love humor, and I do like to think there's some in here,
Oh,
but
yes.
the situations, the situations are not funny at all. That's right. I think that, for me, humor often is a kind of mask, and I love it. And it allows you to get away with a lot of things, you know, when it's funny. And I just feel that the braver I've gotten sometimes going into a story, I maybe it's just my willingness as I've gotten older to go into those darker corners that I have wanted to venture into. And I think,
well, you've really done it here. You've done it all here. It's wonderful. And I'm not saying I miss the humor, but I see a new thing. You know, I see a new thing happening.
I think Life After Life definitely shifted it in that direction, and in a certain way. Yeah. And I've always loved, you know, I am that person who sort of never got over our town, you know. I mean, from junior high on, I mean, I think that I was just so drawn to that play and sort of the ordinary day and the memory and the use of time. And the same with Tennessee Williams, and the Glass Menagerie, the same way, the use of memory.
Yes, and you have also been compared, Ron Rash, I think, compared you to Flannery O'Connor in your use of, you know, being very funny, but very, very, very serious too. And I would say more, maybe Carson McCullers, something about the language, you know, something about the mood and so on. But I mean, we have community in all of these.
And
and voice.
McCullers is definitely a big favorite of mine. And I think reading The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, you know, as a 20-year-old, just
Mm-hmm.
all the doors and windows blew open. And I just love how her work is holding up these days in with all the changes in society, because she was always in there championing the invisible and those people left
Mm-hmm.
out and excluded.
Mm-hmm.
And she, you know, again, the kind of community piece, where you're both dealing with the individual within, but the way that lives crisscross. I think I'm just, you know, endlessly fascinated by the
I see a whole lot
connection.
of resonance between you and her, in your work, and Catherine Ann Porter, I have to say. Yeah,
Yeah, I love
and I'm
stories.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and she's written about that catastrophe. She's written about the plague, and here we are in the plague, in the plague time, and I just can't help but find something. Sometimes you just everything seems to connect.
Yeah,
You
and it's
see a
not
kind of resonance, and I think your book is just particularly good reading for right now. I really do.
well,
I really do.
my hope with the novel anyway was that, you know, it would prompt the reader's own memories of
Mhm.
these, you know, the little specifics of life, that you might find in your own memories.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, it was already, I think, a lot about what can be taken for granted in
Mhm.
life, pre pre-pandemic, and now
Mhm.
don't we really feel it? I mean, wouldn't you
Yeah.
love to be on a bustling, crowded sidewalk, you know, going
Yes.
somewhere,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
sitting in a packed theater, you know, annoyed that the person's using your armrest, or you know, or eating your popcorn,
Exactly. Right.
all those little things that annoy us, and yet we would, um, wouldn't we love that right now?
Mhm. Mhm. Well, this is just a very good time for us to, I think, be thinking about everything that you're posing here, and also about the memories that are being created daily during this catastrophe, that we're in the middle of, and particularly for our children, and so on, and the memories they will have that they are creating, that are being created now for them. And it's just there's a great deal of resonance here, I think. As I said, maybe we should turn this over to
I
other
think we
people's
should.
questions, because I can go on
I
forever.
have missed you so much. I've just sat here talking like we're out on your.
I know, I keep forgetting, but everybody's here, and I know that they have some questions too. So.
Well, I think I can safely speak for other people when I say that I don't think we would mind just sitting and listening to y'all talk on your porch. But we do have some questions. So let's go ahead and get to those. So the first one is from Jan, and it's a craft question for Jill. Did the structure of your novel emerge before or after you began writing? And what would you call this form? Braided, collage?
Oh wow! I think it is a collage, and definitely the structure. Um, the structure came out of the pieces. So I would definitely say a collage. I had some vague ideas about where I thought it was all going to land, but I learned a long time ago not to commit myself to an ending, because all too often the story finds a natural path that's otherwise.
And that has worked out so well in this case, and in general, you just are with the characters the whole time, and
Oh yeah.
And you don't need that sense of Lee was talking about earlier, but you don't really need that sense of a defined beginning or end. You're just
glad
sharing
I'll
space.
say that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's just great to be with these people, you know, even when it's hard to be with them. Okay, so next question. This is from Lydia, age 9. Hi, Lydia. When did you start writing? What age?
You know, and this is true for Lee too. I know we both wrote as children. You know, for me, it was self-entertainment. I just loved making up stories, and that's when I definitely wrote a lot of very bad poetry. But I loved it. I think my earliest memory of sort of dabbling, you know, I was 7.
Wow. And Lee, remind us when you started?
Me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I started writing. I wrote my first novel when I was 8 on my mother's stationery. And it had as main characters the favorite person in my household, who was Adlai Stevenson. He was the hero, and also Jane Russell, whom I had seen in the movies. And in the novel, they go west in a covered wagon together. And when they get there, they get married and become Mormons. I just learned about Mormons because they came to our door. So that was my first novel.
Well, and yet you didn't become a speculative fiction writer.
No.
Because that's what you have. Like, I feel like that story would sell as speculative fiction, you know, alternate history sort of right now. You might want to revisit that. Thank you.
But I was always writing as a child. I was an only child, and I think that's what born to much older parents who didn't ever think they'd ever have a child. And so, you know, you had time, and you had to amuse yourself, and you had these parents who were just so thankful to have any child at all. You know, I mean, if I'd said, instead of I wanted to be a writer, I want to be a murderer, they'd buy me the axe. You know, so they were very encouraging.
That's great. I suspect that Lydia is getting a lot of encouragement too. So thank you for that question. And this is from Nancy. Can you talk a little bit more about working with your editor, Kathy?
Oh, yes. Just a wonderful experience. And, you know, she saw this novel at a time not long after, you know, Lee had seen, which was kind of like taking a laundry basket of all kinds of things in it. But Kathy is just such a smart, attentive reader, and I have to say, you know, wonderfully very much in the school of Shannon Ravenel, who I worked with for 30 years, and Louis Rubin also, who Lee also worked with. A kind of editing that is attentive and thoughtful and insightful, and yet not judgmental. You know, it feels like a conversation. It feels like an exploration. You know, you're asked for clarity if something isn't working, and you know, sometimes just the way Kathy could phrase a question, I would know the answer. You know, I'd be like, oh my gosh, well, I didn't even need to go there, did I? You know, because I did a lot of, there was more cutting of that rough draft than anything, because I did do that thing. I threw it all on the bed, and there were things that needed to go to Goodwill or the trash can. So that's, you know, so in many ways she was coaching it, you know, and Very, very helpful. I mean, I would be amazed at any writer who does not need those fresh eyes and opinions coming from elsewhere. So, I mean, I think that editing is a real art, and so I feel very lucky to have had this experience, because some people might have looked at it and thought, what is this? and she really saw the vision that I had.
Thank you for sharing that. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Lee.
And I was just going to say, Kathy is so good at seeing the shape of things, the overall shape. I mean, you've given her, she helped me with what was essentially a memoir, and I didn't have any shape to it though. Still, I just didn't have any shape. It was different essays and different things. It had no shape, nothing. It was like a hodgepodge, and she just kept asking these calm questions, and pretty soon I began to see a shape that might emerge, so it was very helpful. She's a wonderful editor.
And thank you both for sharing that. And just in general, I think the role of editors isn't something that we often give enough thought to, potentially. And people who are perhaps starting out as authors, I know we always have a lot of writers who join us for these events, and particularly enjoy hearing about your process and how things kind of work for you. And that's something that doesn't come up as much, which is the role of having someone else there to help refine and to not think of it as someone messing up what you've done, but as someone, as someone bringing out the best in what you've written. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, so this next question, I don't know who it's from, but you'll know who you are when it just says iPhone. And it's Hey Jill, so it sounds like it might even be someone who knows you, but I'm not sure who it is. Did you always know while writing what would happen to the characters while in the space of the novel? There's actually two questions. And do you think any of the characters in Hieroglyphics will reappear in your next work? Because we know that there was a little bit of sharing with the previous.
I did not. No, I had ideas, I sort of had, well, either this or this, but I was open to some different possibilities along the way. And I think, and I don't know what, I'd be curious to hear Lee address this as well. I think a lot of times with a short story, I'm much clearer on where it's going to land than in a novel. And there's something about getting into the groove of a novel that it really, these characters really do take on their own momentum. And I got a big surprise with this one, and I'm not going to say what, because it would be a spoiler, but it was one of those where I was sitting there working, and I'm, like, of course, why didn't I know this? But I did not. And I think that to sort of open yourself up to that ability to change your mind or what you were thinking is really important when you're writing a novel. And I'm pretty sure some of my students, I think I saw Dina is here, and maybe Evan. Anyway, we talk about these things a lot, but I do think keeping your options open is a good thing. And yeah, I could really imagine circling back and checking on Shelley and Harvey. I have done little cameos off and on with different books where people, it feels like the characters just keep going.
Well, and yeah, I think they would definitely be it would definitely be interesting to see where they are down the road a little bit. Both of them, but I'll just admit a fondness for Harvey in particular, just to see what comes of what's going on inside his marvelous little head.
Thank you.
Yeah. So for Jill and Lee, this is from Sandra. The question is, what's next? And how long after you finish one do you start another? So I guess part of the question is, are you planning something right now? Is something already fermenting for both of you? And then in general, is there a usual sort of timeline between works?
Well, I never let go of something until I have something new going. It's like my greatest fear is to be without that piece of work. And so right now I have some short stories that I've been working on, and I've sort of collected and messed with them all along the way, and I have maybe an idea for a novel, but nothing absolute. I have several things in mind, but yeah, I never let go until there's something new. So I'd love to hear Lee talk.
Well, I'm always working on something. I mean, I don't know what other people are thinking about. I've always got something going on. I mean, if you're stopped in traffic, what are you thinking about, you other people? I don't know. But anyway, yeah, so I am working on something, and it's named Silver Alert, and it's about Silver Alert's like Amber Alert, but it's when an old guy, like an old person, gets lost in their car, and the highway patrol are looking for him. And this is about an old guy who finds the keys, but in this case, it's a Porsche Carrera, and he takes off. And I was really driving up the coast of Florida and saw this Porsche Carrera Silver Alert, and then you're supposed to call in if you see the car. So my husband and I just started making up this whole story about who is in the car. We got him, and then who's with him. And then we got her too. She is actually the pedicurist from assisted living. He's booked right out of assisted living, and he's headed north. And so that's where we are. And I'm going north up Route 1 right now, and we're going to see what happens. So I'm about as far as Marathon, going up the Keys from. So that's where we are.
That's wonderful. And it sounds like you can measure the progress with mile markers on the road.
Yeah, that's what the chapters are. They're mile markers.
Oh,
yeah.
That sounds wonderful. Yeah, really delightful.
I don't know. But I mean, you just get obsessed.
Well, but that's what keeps you at it and produces such wonderful results in the end. I guess we all just appreciate the obsession in the meantime.
So it really is. It is a great pleasure, I have to say.
That's good to hear. I mean, we as readers, we would. I don't think we would want to know, although we know there are sort of tortured artists. I feel like the better scenario is to think that the people who produce things that we like to read actually enjoy the process at least some of the time.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say the great fortune for me as a young writer, I had only taken one creative writing class by the wonderful Max Steele. And at the end, you had to get permission to take the next class. And Max said, he gave me permission, and he said, and I'm pretty sure we're about to hire this new young teacher. And if we can get her, I'm going to make sure you're in her class. And that was Lee.
And I had no business teaching in a college. I mean, no business. And so that was my first college class, and I was just terrified. And then there was Jill and about 5 or 6 other writers who were so good. And it just turned out to be this immense pleasure, so much so that I just went right on teaching. It was great.
It was great. It was great.
That's wonderful. I mean, that you know, that Lee was part of your formation as a writer, Jill. And then Jill influenced Lee as a teacher, which then of course influenced all of these other writers.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so that's wonderful. I mean, that gives you a connection to, I imagine, a great many writers in the, you know, in the region. Have both of you then to thank.
Such a great community in this state. It's really, we're very, very lucky, both with our indie bookstores and with our writing community.
I agree. Yeah, we're
very
really
supportive of each other, and you know, of bookstores and books, and you know, all of that.
So it's again, I would actually be perfectly happy to listen to y'all talk for however long you would like to on Zoom, but it's now a few minutes after 7, and I want to be you know, be aware of people's time and other places they might have to be. So we will go ahead and wrap up. There's actually, what I'll say though to the folks in the audience is first of all, thank you so much for coming again. We appreciate you, and we appreciate you coming out this evening to support Jill and her new book, and to listen to Lee and this wonderful conversation. And if you need to head off, please do. But I will also say to Jill, we do have one more question that I can ask if you have a moment.
Okay.
I would like
I'm
to answer
delighted.
it, because we still do have a good number of people on the call before we wrap up entirely. So that question is, because we've talked a lot about the form of this novel being different, and this question is, was the experience of writing this novel with its unique form different from the previous works? Was the experience of writing it different?
It really was, because I think so much of it came in those fragmented ways, and maybe it's an age thing. Maybe with a younger, more supple brain, it would have all stayed there. But this is one of those novels I was just constantly, compulsively writing little tiny notes. If I didn't, it was like waking up from a dream, and it would be gone. And so I had just all these little slips of ideas, you know, or a thought, and I would be, oh, well, that sounds just like what Shelley would think, or that's Lil's thought. And you know, so for 4 years, I felt like I had these 4 people. Don't say this except at a bookstore in a writing group. You know, I had these 4 voices in my head just going. And so I did take those notes all the time. And so it was a different way of writing, but also something really kind of comforting, you know, because I always felt like I had a little something to work on. And I have to say, I'm looking now at Bess and Lydia Newton, and it is so good to see you, Bess. And thank you, Lydia, for your question. It's just wonderful to see all of you plugged in during this very strange time. It's, you know, I actually am finding that I feel like I'm going places, you know, with this virtual book tour. And it's kind of wonderful that we're able to connect.